Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to dive into the feminine cycle, meaning your menstrual cycle, because I have experienced myself and I speak to so many women that are like into their late 20s, 30s and even older that don't have a clear picture of how their menstrual cycle is. And I do believe that when you are in contact with your cycle, your womb space, that is when you are in deeply contact with your feminine essence and your feminine energy. And your feminine energy can be accessed through your womb space. So if you have that disconnection between you and your womb and your cycle and everything that is connected to the womb, you're also disconnected to yourself and to your whole body. You will also be disconnected to your psychic senses, deep intuition, and all of these magnificent, magical things about being a woman. So let's dive in. My intention for today is that you can walk away from this video and know how your cycle is put together, how it works, how you can work your cycle, how you can, as best as possible, schedule your life connected to where you are in your cycle and actually utilize all of the different phases of the cycle. This will also help to balance your hormones a little bit more, because a lot of us women are running as small men connected to the men's cycle and not to our female cycle. And this is throwing us out of balance with our hormonal system because of stress and overwhelm, so on and so forth. So I really want to empower women to understand their bodies and to work with their bodies, because when we are not working with our body, we're working against it and we're disconnecting ourselves from our body and our feminine power. So let's take it from the beginning. I was in my late 20s when I started to understand how the female cycle actually was and how the different phases actually impacted my life and how I could use the different 4 phases of the cycle to optimize my days, my months, my weeks, my work, my life, everything. So from I was a teenager and we started to learn about menstruation, about your cycle, we actually didn't learn a lot about the cycle, not that I can remember anyway. So what I believed for so many years, long into my 20s, was that the feminine cycle had 2 phases when it actually has 4. So the feminine cycle have 4 phases. And each of these phases have 4 different archetypes. They have 4 different energy levels. They have different hormones that impact us in different ways. It also have different features. And this is very, very deeply connected to the moon phases as well. And we're going to go into that as well. So this with the moon is very interesting, because I mentioned a little bit about being small men, acting like men, and the cycle of men. And men have a cycle connected to the sun, where the sun, rises in the morning and it sets in the evening. Men is connected to the same cycle hormonally. So they run on testosterone and cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone. And I think you know about testosterone, that's the male hormone. So what is happening is that when men wake up in the morning, testosterone rises and then it falls slightly throughout the day until the evening. And this is happening every day throughout the month, throughout the year. And then we come to women and the feminine. And the feminine is flowing. The feminine is not linear like the sun and men's hormonal levels are linear. The feminine ebbs and flows, just like the ocean, just like the moon, waxes, wanes. We are very, very deeply connected to the moon and also to the seasons of nature as we go through springtime, summertime, autumn, and winter, just like Mother Nature. So Mother Nature is feminine, just as us. So we are deeply, deeply, deeply connected to nature and to the change of nature. And what is happening during the feminine cycle is that the seasons of nature is reflected in our cycle. We're going to go into the cycle and how it's built up, what kind of moon phase our different phases are reflecting, also the seasons, the feminine archetypes of the woman, energy levels. We're going to go a little bit into hormones just so you know the basics without being too technical. But I want you to understand how your body works. And when I'm speaking about this, I'm speaking about the fertile women, meaning that you're a woman still with your bleed. So from teenagers, when we're getting our first period, that's called the menarche. That's our first ever period. So from that time until we are in menopause, when we have stopped bleeding, because then we're going into a different phase of our life. And what is really, really interesting is that everything is very connected to the archetypes that we're also going to go through today, but I'm not going to go that deep into them because that I will do in a different video. So, speaking of nature, let's start there. So we have our menstrual phase. That is the first phase of the cycle. So we start to count our days through our cycle from our first day of the bleed. This is the winter phase. Then we go into spring. This is the phase right after our bleed. Then we have the summer phase. This is connected to our ovulation. Then we have fall or autumn in the end. That is connected to our luteal phase and the last days before we are heading into a new bleed and starting the cycle all over again. So that is the seasons of nature and how that is connected to women. And then we have the moon. And you know, from ancient times, the moon was seen as the original goddess. She was also changing, waxing, waning, just as women are changing all the time throughout our lives. So what we also can see, and I'm going to give you some fun facts about the moon and how that is connected to the female cycle, is that we are so deeply connected to the phase of nature of the moon that we are actually normally and in general having the same cycle when we are counting days through our cycle, just as the moon cycle. So when you start to track your cycle, you can usually see that you're having your menstruation on a specific time of the moon phase. And this is very interesting to see because you can also utilize that energy of the moon, of where you are, and bleeding on different phases of the moon, it says something specific about the time when we are bleeding. So the moon itself, when we are bleeding, and the phase that we are connected to then is telling something about us. If we're more focused on our inner landscape or if we are focused more on what's around us. But that is for another time. Let's speak a little bit more about the moon goddess. As I said, this was the first ever goddess that people were looking up on and seeing this magical change all the time. And I could see how that reflected within the physical woman that was on earth, meaning that we as women were representatives of the goddess here on earth. And also, of course, we were the one that was giving life. And this is something that was very mystical and magical far back in the days before they understood how we conceived, where babies came from, where soul came from, and so on and so forth. And speaking of the moon goddess is usually seen as a triple goddess. And this triple goddess has 3 faces, and it is usually represented of 3 archetypes, being maiden, mother, and the crone. And these 3 plus 1 more is also represented in our feminine cycle. So the goddess is also represented in our feminine cycle, and we're going to go a little bit into that now. So let's take one phase at a time, and let's start at the first one, which is the menstrual phase. This is the bleeding phase. This is the phase where we are counting the days around 1 to 4. You know, some women have 5 days, some women have more. If you have more, that might mean that you have some instability in your hormones. And around 3 to 4 days is actually ideal. 5 is not bad, but you might want to see on your symptoms and what your body and your womb and your bleed is telling you, because it's telling you a lot about the month that has been and what might be the issue or the imbalance within your body. That as well is something that we have to do in another video or another time. But I just want to point that out so you understand that every bleed that you have is actually a health card given to you, where it's actually telling you how your body is doing. So the bleeding days is from day 1 to 4, give or take a few days. But to make it easy in this video, we're gonna just have it from 1 to 4. This is the bleeding phase. This is also the winter time when it comes to the seasons, and it is the new moon, meaning the dark moon when we can't see it. This is also the crone phase, and the crone is the wise old woman. Also, when we are talking about the different phases of a woman's life, we also have the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And the crone is represented after menopause, or from menopause and the rest of her life, because she is the wise woman that have gone through all of the cycle. She has a lot of experience, you know, a lot of wisdom, of teachings that she can give to the women and the girls that are coming after her. And the bleeding phase in our menstrual cycle is a phase of deep inner knowing. This is the phase where we are turning our gaze inwards, where we want to be connected to our body, relaxed, taking care of ourselves, slowing down. And this is a very magical phase, because this is also the phase spiritually and energetically where you are most connected to the womb. We also have something called a liminal space, meaning that you're in between the physical and the spiritual world. This is a place where the veil is very thin, and this is happening in the menstrual phase. So if you sit down during your menstrual phase, turning your gaze inwards, start to listen to what the body is telling us, so I start to listen to our intuition, you can actually also very easily get in touch with your spiritual guides, your higher self, everything that we can't see, because you are in this liminal phase, just as going into death is a liminal space, birth is a liminal space. This is where the woman is walking in the physical realm as well as in the spiritual and energetic realm. This is pretty cool. And when I had my awakening and I had my bleed, I found that sitting in meditation, going inwards in these phases, made it so much easier to me to connect to the spiritual realm. And this is when I started to actually look forward to having my bleed, because then I felt that it was so easy to get in contact, to get guidance. And this is also why we are calling the bleed for the crone phase, because that is when women are going into ourselves, we are connecting to the spiritual realm really easily, and we are actually collecting this bigger wisdom into our womb space, into our body. And when our winter phase is over and we are getting into spring phase and into the follicular phase, we can go out there into the world again, and we can share this beautiful wisdom that we have received during our bleeding phase. So in our menstrual phase, what is really important here is that we are relaxing and we're taking care of ourselves. We don't execute in a lot of stuff. We don't start a lot of new things right now, because on the physical level, all of our hormones are at its lowest. So we don't want to stress our body. And what is happening during the menstrual phase is also that we are shedding a lot of emotions, of energies that we have collected during the last cycle that we've had. So this is a time for shedding. And just as in winter, we are kind of going into this hibernation and we are getting ready to the spring. And you know, if you live as far north as me, where there is winter with snow and it's cold and it just feels like death because there's no sound outside. This is reflecting in our menstrual cycle and in our bleed, where we're actually going into this hibernation and into this physical, mental, spiritual death and preparing for a new cycle to start. So I wouldn't recommend heavy training. You can go for a walk if you want to move your body a little bit. Yin yoga is really nice. Yoga nidra is really nice at this time, especially the first couple of days. And what is very important also to consider at this phase is that your uterus, your womb space, is double the weight of what it usually is. So you are carrying an organ that is much heavier than usual. So you don't want to, jump around and do heavy lifting and doing a lot of running, because in some women, this sometimes can dislocate the womb space. That might cause a lot of pains. So we want to take it easy. We want to take care of our bodies in this phase. So let's go into the next phase, and that is the follicular phase. This is the springtime connected to nature. This is where we start to wake up again from our hibernation. We start to feel more alive again. On the physical level, our hormones are rising again. So estrogen is rising and testosterone is starting to rise. In our follicular phase, we count the days approximately from 5 to 12. And this is the phase where you might feel more outgoing, where you want to start new projects, start to plan your cycle a little bit more, what you want to execute, what you want to do. This is the phase where you're starting to get more energy, and this is a time where you can utilize that. So actually planning social events during the follicular phase and also the next phase, the ovulatory, is smart. Because we all know that we have sometimes planned a date with a friend or a social event or a birthday or whatever in our follicular phase, when we're actually very outgoing, but we have planned it 2 weeks later, and that is when we're in a luteal phase, where we're more introverted and don't want to execute so much. We are not as social. Sometimes we just feel that we don't want to go. So we don't want to do that. We want to plan our events and how to execute our month connected to where we are in our cycles, so we can live more easily in flow, feel better. We are taking more care of our hormones, because probably that when you have been planning to go to an event and you don't want to go, it is a little bit stressing, and we don't want to cause that harm on our bodies, do we? And of course, sometimes we have to go on these events, and that is totally fine. And you might that time don't want to be there as long as you would have if you were in your follicular phase. We also have another hormone that is rising within this phase. It is usually just called FSH, and that stands for follicular stimulating hormone, because we are making a follicle with a new egg. And I don't want to go more deep into that, but it's good that you know that this is a hormone that we also have this phase. Connected to the moon, this is the phase where we are in our waxing moon. So this is also the time where we are very connected to our maiden archetype. And the maiden is the part of us that is more naive. She's not that experienced. You know, she's going into life. This is very spring energy before everything is blooming, you know. This is the maiden. She has a lot to learn still. So this is the phase when it comes to the physical, where you might want to do more of strength training, you might want to do more running if you enjoy that, you know, getting your pulse up a little bit, because here you're starting to get more and more testosterone the closer you get to your ovulation phase, meaning that we are also building more muscles if you're actually doing some strength training here, and you're getting more out of heavy workouts compared to if you did a heavy workout in your period. Because remember, in your period all of your hormones are quite low, so you won't get as much out of your workouts in this phase. But in your follicular, the hormones is rising, we want to utilize that, and this is a phase where we usually feel very good, you know, we're more flirty, we're more outgoing, we want to travel. This is a very creative phase for many women. Now let's go into the third phase of our cycle. This is the ovulatory phase. This is where we are fertile, and we usually count the ovulatory phase from day 13 to 16. Now, what is very important here to know is the ovulation in itself is something that occurred instantly. We usually say that we have an ovulation during 24 to 48 hours, usually 24. This is the instant where the follicles are releasing an egg. So each month you have one egg coming from one ovary, and the next month you have one egg coming from the other ovary. And this is happening, as I said, during an instant. So this is a moment. But usually our ovulatory phase, our ovulation, is something that is happening between the days 13 and 16. And this can vary a little bit from month to month. But that is also why you want to track your cycle. So you'll see that there is a pattern of when your ovulation is. And you might be a woman that has your ovulation in the same cycle day every month. And this is interesting, because this also helps you to track your fertility, and this also helps you to track when or when not you want to have sex. That is something else that I want to touch on later on, not in this video but in another, and that is how you can track your cycle without using hormonal birth control or the copper IUD or anything that is disrupting your hormones and your body and your cycle. But that is for another time. So the ovulatory phase is on the full moon. This is when the moon is bright and shiny, and this is also when we are very bright and shiny. This is when estrogen and testosterone is at its highest, meaning that usually we feel more beautiful and we're more outgoing, we're more flirty, more sensual. And this is a phase where our body is actually also physically changing to attract a mate. So our lips are actually getting fuller, the pupil in our eyes are actually getting a little bit bigger. So we are actually on the physical level from Mother Nature's side trying to get more beautiful, to attract a partner and to get pregnant. Connected to the archetypes of the goddess, this is the mother phase. This is where we are getting more experience, and this is where we feel very at ease with life. And also when your hormones are at its top here, We want to use that for heavy strength training, like really execute on the workout side and utilize the hormones that we have right now. This is also when we can schedule in a lot of work, a lot of social activities, because we have more energy. Let's go into the last phase of our cycle. The last phase is the luteal phase. This is from day 17 to approximately day 28 or 31-ish. This is the phase where we are connected to autumn or fall in nature, where we are starting, to wind down a little bit. Our energy is dropping. We are getting more and more prepared for winter that is coming as we are moving towards the menstrual phase. Connected to the moon, this is where we are in our waning phase of the moon. This is where the moon is starting to get dark again. Connected to the archetypes, we are now in the wild woman, and you might feel that there is some resonance here between the wild woman and PMS. This is where we are having a lot of emotions coming up. This is when we are feeling more irritable, rage. We're starting to get more emotional usually, and it is important to address that it's not supposed to be heavy PMS in your cycle. If you have heavy PMS where you feel that this is making your life harder every month and that is lasting very long, that is a sign that you need to have a look at your hormones again. So the wild woman is not a phase in the triple goddess, but we want to put her into the menstrual cycle because she is a part of us. And throughout our lineage as women in several thousands of years now, we have been suppressing this archetype. We have not been feeling our rage, our emotions, our sadness, our grief, because if we did, we were actually being looked upon as a crazy woman. But we are not. This sacred rage, these emotions that are rising and fluctuating throughout our cycle, this is a very important part about being a woman, and also how we process feelings and emotions throughout our cycle. And I believe that suppressing the anger, the grief, and suppressing the wild woman also will somehow manifest as some kind of imbalance or illness or disease that is connected to our reproductive system, our womb space, and also our voices. And this is something that I will speak more about in my coming free training, which you can find a link below to register to that and learn more about how you can free your voice. On a physical level, estrogen is now low again. Testosterone is low. What happened in the ovulatory phase was also right before egg was released. We have a spike in something that is called LH. LH is called luteinizing hormone. When LH is being released, we have a spark of progesterone, and estrogen and testosterone is lowering down. And for the luteal phase, we want a higher amount of progesterone. And what that is helping us with is that we are getting chilled, relaxed, we feel more at ease and calm. And what I'm seeing in most women is that we have too low progesterone in this phase, and that is causing PMS as heavy or severe irritability or depression and anxiety and uneasiness and trouble with sleep. And we want a high progesterone in this phase so that we can go more smoothly into our menstrual phase. So the luteal phase is where we want to wind down a bit, as I said. This means also when it comes to workouts, we don't want to do very heavy strength training. And of course you can still do strength training, but do it more with lighter weights. And the farther you are coming towards the menstruation, the less and less heavy it should be, meaning that you might just use your body weight in the end, and going into some yoga or tai chi or something that is more light in the very end, meaning the last week, 5 days before you are expecting your period. And this is how you can work with your hormones at this phase, because we don't want to have high cortisol during our phase. This is something that we can more easily handle in our ovulatory phase and also in our late follicular phase. But in our luteal phase and in our menstrual phase, we want to feel more relaxed and at ease and have lower cortisol. So this is also the phase where you want to finish off your projects, do the rest of the work that you need to do, prepare for winter season and hibernation, so you can actually relax when you come to that phase. And something that is very important to remember here when it's connected to the whole of the menstrual phase is that the days that I have been mentioning now, these are the approximately days of the different phases. But what we want to remember is that we are women, we are human, and we are organic, and there's no typical start and end point in our cycle except from when we go into the menstrual phase, when we can actually see the bleed is coming, and then it's kind of like toning out a bit as you go to the ends of the days of your cycle usually. But in between that and in between the phases, it is more like they're kind of weaving together, like melting together a little bit. So this is also why it is important for you to get to know your body more, to get to know how does the different phases feel like for you, how is the energy rising and flowing through your cycle. And this is something that I would highly recommend you to track, and I would recommend to track at least 6 to 8 months. Like, write it down, get a book, get a paper, write down how you're feeling on the emotional level every day, the energetic level, how you feel when it comes to creativity. Here you might see that creativity might be very high in your luteal phase, for instance, and not in the follicular phase, as I mentioned earlier. And it's cool to see and get to know how your body functions, because we are all individuals when it comes to the end of this, and there's no standard, and it's not right or wrong. But also when it comes to the hormones and symptoms and stuff like that, we want to have a look at what is ideal, so you can function best throughout your months, throughout the years, throughout your life in your phase of the menstrual cycle, in your fertile phase. I would also, if I were you, track your libido. When do you feel more flirty? When do you feel more sensual? When do you want sex more with yourself, with a partner, and when do you don't? That is something that is very interesting as well. You also want to track your discharge, how it looks like the color. Is it transparent? Is it white, grayish? Is it green or yellow? This is also your bodily health card that you're getting throughout the month. And you will also see that it is changing during your cycle. So during the ovulatory phase and the late follicular phase, you might see that your discharge is getting more richer, it's getting clear, it's getting more stretchy, and this is a sign that you are fertile. And then right after your period, you might not see a lot of discharge. Perhaps your body is creating a little bit more, and what kind of color that is. And you will also see right after your ovulatory phase that it is changing from this clear discharge into being more thick, white, grayish, and perhaps not as much. And then you will see when you are drawing near to your menstrual phase, you're perhaps getting less and less discharge. And this is also a phase in your sexual life where you might want to use lube or taking some more time with foreplay before you're getting into the actual act. So I hope that you have learned a lot of new things. I hope that you have a picture of how we are connected to the goddess, to nature, to the moon, to the seasons, and how exciting it is to be a woman, because you have all of these different phases and you have all of these strengths connected to each phase. You can also try to track how it is to sit down in meditation, or try to connect to the spiritual realm or to your intuition, your gut feeling, and see where you feel that you're more connected to that energetical realm and spiritual realm compared to when you're more connected to the physical realm. Perhaps you see, just as I did, that it is easier to connect to the spiritual and the energetic realm in your menstrual phase, and that it is so much harder when you're in your ovulatory phase, because then you're very physical, you're very earthy, you're very here in this world, executing, taking action, being very present within your body and what's happening within your life, and very outgoing. And then you're kind of turning the gaze. So you will see that you're going in and out, connecting inside, connecting to the outer world, and then going in and out. And during a lifetime of going through these cycles, shedding emotions, shedding experiences in your menstrual phase, having all of these amazing, beautiful downloads, you are creating this library of wisdom within your womb and within your body that you can give to your daughters, your granddaughters, your sisters, your friends, and we can change the world for women, one woman at a time. Thank you for being here. I look forward to the next time.